Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Hello and greetings, and it is the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlsen, and I am joined with Chris Borff. By Chris Borff, with Chris Borff, either way.
It works. Holy rusted metal, Batman.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, and I'm also joined with my friend and partner, Zach Powers.
Just do one of the Jim Carrey lines, you know. Riddle me this fucking, I'm a pitcher now. I'm throwing the pitch.
Don't think we've had enough coffee to do it justice. Welcome to the Movie Trap. On the Movie Trap, one of the three hosts you just met picks a theme, and then each of us picks a movie based on that theme. After we've watched all three movies, we then vote on which one was our favorite movie with an allocated amount of points, plus some bonus points we earned along the way. And then whichever movie wins the vote, that host gets to pick the next theme. And you are in the middle of round 2 of my theme, which is movie soundtracks that are better than the actual movie. And previously on the Movie Trap, I chose 1993's Judgment Night, which was not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but the soundtrack was, shall we say, at least consensusly fair to middling. So we are now today rejoining, shall we say. We are bathing in familiar bathwater, shall we say, because Zach Powers has chosen a sort of rerun for all of us. Because back in the day we did this movie. I think we did it with the Fantastic Four. This is back when we did
Correct.
2 movies an episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is
May of 2011 we covered this film.
That's right.
Game of Thrones had just premiered.
That's right.
Osama bin Laden had about 2 more days to live.
That's right. Yep. And Donald Trump had just started the birth certificate craze. It was great. We are watching 1995's Batman Forever. As we were kind of pointing out our Slack chat, it's our first honest-to-goodness superhero movie. We've done sort of comic book iterations, and you could argue that The Mummy was supposed to be a superhero movie of a sort. But here we are. We're donning the tights, getting the cape and cowl. We're going to Batman. But before we get into the bright, fuzzy, wannabe 1960s TV show style that the movie tries to crib, let's get to some points. So, Chris Borff, you got 1 bonus point from me last time, so you have 11 points for final voting, plus 3 bonus points to give out. I have 10 points for final voting and 2 bonus points to give out. And Zach Powers, you have 3 bonus points with 10 points for final voting. So that brings us to it. Zach, you did this. You get to do it. Riddle me this, Zach. What is Batman Forever?
Batman Forever is a 1995 superhero movie directed by Joel Schumacher. It stars Val Kilmer, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, Nicole Kidman, and Chris O'Donnell. Essentially, Batman Forever tells the story of Batman, who is or isn't the same Batman from the Tim Burton movies. It's kind of a James Bond situation where, like, some of the supporting cast are the same actors, but, like, the connection between the stories is tenuous to non-existent. In any case, we find that Batman is in the midst of a crime spree perpetrated by none other than Two-Face, who we see at the beginning of the film is robbing Gotham's Second National Bank, or I assume it was the Second National Bank.
Knowing Two-Face.
Yeah, it seems probable. Which is ultimately revealed to be a deadly death trap, where he intends to pour bubbling acid all over Batman and the unsuspecting people of Gotham. Batman, of course, manages to save the guard and defuse his deadly trap, much to his consternation, but Two-Face escapes. Meanwhile, there is a young psychiatrist, Dr. Chase Meridian, who is obsessed with Batman and, to some degree, Bruce Wayne, and discovering their psychology. She has a series of meetings with both Batman and Bruce Wayne, at this point not knowing they are the same person. But there's more on Bruce Wayne's plate because he is managing Wayne Enterprises, where they have a new employee named Edward Nygma. who has a revolutionary new idea to make television more interactive. It's like VR television, basically, is the pitch. A little device that can do that. And Bruce Wayne, and he's like, he comes up Bruce Wayne, and he's like, listen, man, I got this idea. Be 100% in and fund this now, or we walk away. No tests. No tests? I can't show you the schematics. Like, it's the most insane pitch I've ever seen. He's just like, I'm not going to show you shit. You just have to say yes now or it's over. Regardless, Enigma decides he's going to take it into his own hands. He decides to test the machine on his boss, who is preparing to fire him for accosting Bruce Wayne that day.
Ed Begley Jr.
Ed Begley Jr. and finds he can actually suck intelligence out of people using his device and or read their minds. So he does this to Ed Begley Jr. and then kicks him out of a window and alters the footage to make it look like he committed suicide. Nonetheless, he also resigns Wayne Enterprises. Bruce goes to a circus date with the psychiatrist, which is again accosted by Two-Face and company. And at this attack, young Dick Grayson's family, the Flying Graysons, are killed as a result of Two-Face's attempted bombing. And Bruce Wayne determines to take Dick in as his ward. Regardless, Riddler sees this attack and is inspired to, Enigma becomes the Riddler at this point, and is inspired to team up with Two-Face in order to get his device in the home of everyone. I'm assuming the idea is that Two-Face provides the funding, because beyond that, I am not entirely sure what Two-Face brings to the arrangement.
I think
they rob banks and jewelry stores and stuff.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Capital too.
There's a bit of a montage of them robbing, and then they fund Riddler's box.
Enigma,
is what he calls it.
I think he's the
indeed.
establishment villain, whereas Edward Nygma is the new startup villain. Essentially, he's looking for angel funding. This is very much like a Facebook. They're pitching Facebook is what's happening in this, but keep going, Zach.
Dick begins to discover that Bruce Wayne is in fact Batman, even going so far as stealing his car and going to save a young girl from a group of street toughs who I believe are heavily implied to about to rape that woman, which is pretty dark for the Joel Schumacher Batman movie. And then he reveals to Bruce, who intervenes at the last second to save Dick, that he very much wants to kill Two-Face, and Batman warns of the cost of revenge and becoming a monster when you fight monsters, you know, all that kind of shit. Meanwhile, Enigma Tech is taken off. Lots of people are using the box, and Edward Nygma invites Bruce to a big rooftop party to launch his new device. At the party, Two-Face, impatient on waiting for Enigma to draw out Batman, attacks the party and sets up a death trap in order to finally kill the Batman. And it seems to work, only for a hand to reach into the soil and pull him out. It is none other than Dick Grayson trying to become his sidekick against his wishes. Regardless, Enigma at the party has discovered, because Bruce interacted with his box, that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same person. So they concoct a plan to attack his home on Halloween night. And they do so. They manage to capture Chase Meridian, who is there on a date, and destroy the Batcave and most of his bat objects, except for the plane and the boat and the new suit.
And Robin's suit, presumably.
And Robin's suit. They almost kill Bruce Wayne, but relent because Riddler has a greater plan. So it's time for Bruce Wayne to accept Robin as his protege, and together they will directly assault the Riddler and Two-Face at the Riddler's man-made island base.
You can just call it his lair. It's a lair.
His lair. Yeah, so
pretty villain lair.
They managed to get there, though their plane and boat are destroyed, and Robin runs afoul of Two-Face, who he elects to save instead of let die. But Two-Face, in exchange, pulls a gun and captures him. Batman makes it to the main hub of the lair, where Riddler says, "I have a devilish choice for you, Batman. Will you save Bruce Wayne's love or Batman's young protege? You can only save one." He then elects to throw a batarang at the big fragile thing that they placed prominently in the room, a tactical error, I think, that completely destroys their entire operation. And then
supposed genius Edward Nigma.
And then yeah, it's worth noting there was a series of riddles also that they had to decipher in like a very convoluted way.
Yeah, in a very number 23-esque way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it told them that Edward Nigma was the Riddler, but like, yeah, you probably could have figured that out without the riddle. But regardless, the Riddler drops both of the victims, and Batman does indeed manage to save them both. But as he is bringing them back to safety, Two-Face comes up on them with a gun and says, "This time I'm going to kill you." And he says, "Don't you got to flip your coin?" And he says, "Yes, I do." And he flips his coin, and he throws a bunch of other coins at him, and Two-Face loses his footing and falls to his death. In the post, sort of the denouement, it's revealed Riddler is now in Arkham Asylum and has lost his mind as the result of his foray into the box, bending his, his head and sucking knowledge in and out and all that stuff, and thinks he's Batman and has forgotten that Bruce Wayne is indeed Batman, or is too insane to remember it or something. So yeah, it seems like Chase is like, "Oh, you're a little healthier mentally now, Batman," and he's like, "Great." And Robin also is his partner, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, basically, it's pretty economic. I'm gonna say.
It's funny to. Well, they had to trim the fat a lot apparently, because there's a lot of like deleted scenes of like Val Kilmer sort of like having nightmares and stuff, and a lot more delving in his psyche, which is probably more in line with like how today's Batman world sort of goes. But probably still wouldn't have been all that riveting. It probably would have just stopped the movie. But I do think it's funny, just the image of a psychiatrist telling a man in a bat suit, "You're all better now." You know what?
Yeah.
You're okay.
She gives him like a little dream device because he's been having these nightmares, and at the end he's like, "I don't need it no more." So.
Yeah. It this one's definitely caught in between generations in a really awkward fashion. Like we talked about it before, and I think we lambasted the hell out of it. Yeah. It's just funny because I remembered watching the Batman TV show when I was a kid, and then the Batman movies came out, the ones that were Tim Burton, and those were a little dark, a little serious, but they had the Tim Burton thing where it could be silly.
I'm assuming you mean the Adam West series, and
yes.
I mean not the animated series and not the Adam West series, or do you mean the Adam West series?
I mean the Adam West series, yeah. Because when I was a kid, like I think the animated series came out, and it would have been appropriate for me to watch it. I just never got around to it. Yeah,
I was just about the right age.
I was exactly the right age. I was the target audience for the TV, for the cartoon, and this movie. So yeah, they got me.
I think it just seems like this movie was a victim of its own success as far as the franchise goes, because the first two films, very popular, very dark, but they had Tim Burton there to kind of sell the dark, because he kind of had that as a shtick. But this one was like, it felt, and you guys can tell me how you feel about this, but it felt a lot lighter and more intended for children. Because I think
both those things are true. I think it feels like it feels much more like a Silver Age Batman adventure than the Burton versions. I think there's still a lot of intentional character and style to this movie that is identifiable. Same with Batman and Robin. Like, they're very campy, and like the way Gotham looks is like, now if you make a Batman movie, Gotham's going to look like New York or Chicago.
Yep.
This looks like a fantasy, like comic book, weird sort of gothic world. Like Arkham Asylum looks like a fucking H.P. Lovecraft castle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it totally looks like, not to confuse the thing, but it looks like the movie Metropolis, not the, Superman thing. But,
Gotham.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, the movie Metropolis.
Fritz Lang. Yeah. I actually agree, but I would also even argue that there is, it's not that there's not any camp in the Burton movies. I mean, the Burton movies were basically Tim Burton's spin on the 60s TV show. That's sort of the idea. This was sort of like, well, okay, we've got this spin-off of a spin-off, so you do it kind of like that, but, you know, more for kids. Because what happened was in Batman Returns, like, there was this whole hullabaloo that, like, McDonald's pulled the Happy Meal toys because they were too scared of the penguin or whatever. And so they made this movie because, well, we can't lose the McDonald's Happy Meal market. We've got to make this movie.
Have you seen this clip that went around of a kid at the time Batman Returns came out talking about how deranged it was? Because like, the penguin is trying to kill kids with toys, the stuff kids love most. And like, it's this very like nerdy kid. I'll send it to you later, but it is a very funny.
I would love to see that too.
Yeah. The idea of anyone taking it super serious, I would appreciate that, because looking back, I could appreciate this movie as camp. I don't think I would have enjoyed it as an actual like intense Batman movie.
Because as I said, I was the exact market for this. This was my 10th birthday. We had a birthday party about it. Riddler and Two-Face, Richard and I's favorite villains, finally getting the big screen treatment, because, you know, nowadays comic books are as common as air. You know, back then they weren't that common, and Batman was pretty much it.
Movies,
yeah, comic book movies, and Batman was pretty much it after, you know, Superman. After, you know, Christopher Reeves had the accident with Superman, you know, they stopped making those, but they kept making the Batman movies.
Sure, yeah. This predates Blade, it predates X-Men, it predates Spider-Man, the Raimi version.
You bet. Yeah. And Batman was sort of left on the vine after this in the Batman and Robin movie. It wasn't until Nolan kind of picked it up. And I would argue that, you know, part of the reason why we are so awash with comic book movies is how successful the Nolan franchise was, because Marvel directly cribbed off of Batman Begins with Iron Man and stuff. Now, Nolan didn't have this whole omnipresent view of it being everywhere and forever, but it was the idea of like bringing this kind of superhero-ness into the real world. Now, this movie, Batman Forever, isn't doing that at all. It's not. It's a cartoon. I mean, this is what it is.
For sure.
It's a cartoon for kids. And I would argue that Burton's movies are a little like that as well, a little bit, but it's in that Burton sort of spin, right? Where he's kind of like spinning off of that kind of campy stuff.
Sure, there's an influence.
Really kind of dark and deranged.
Yeah, I mean, like for one, like I don't know, I'm interested because we did talk about this 11 years ago, and I'm interested in if you guys remember how you felt about the movie at the time you saw it then, how you felt about it when it first came out, and how you feel about it now, and if any of those feelings have evolved or changed. But one thing that I know I said in that podcast, I didn't re-listen, but I remember this very distinctly, and it's something I still believe. The villains here are not Riddler and Two-Face. They're just the Joker as the Riddler and the Joker as Two-Face. Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've probably softened a little bit more on Carey a little bit, because if I'm going off the idea that he's kind of cribbing off of Frank Gorshin's performance as the Riddler from the TV show, I kind of see where he's going with it. I do. I mean, is he over the top? Absolutely, but that's why you pay him. You know, especially at that time.
Sure.
I mean, there's like Ace Ventura and The Mask. He's known for over the top, so that's why you pay him. And Tommy Lee Jones is sort of victim of that as well, because he's so close to him. He can't help but have to try to one up him as far as being just way over the top. And that's why Val Kilmer's performance is so like out of place.
Val Kilmer's too staid, too quiet. I mean, I'll say about this movie for sure, it is at least the second best movie we've watched this year where that features Tommy Lee Jones and where coin flipping is a major aspect of the story.
Second best. Okay.
Yes. Well, it's for me, this is
an
kind of
oddly
funny.
Specific Olympic relay.
Mm-hmm.
This takes the silver, baby.
It's funny watching this again, because I remember back when it came out, everybody was very upset when it came out, and it wasn't like a big hit. Like, it was popular, people went and saw it.
Made money.
This one
made
I thought it was more Batman and Robin that was like the
Batman and Robin is where the spell broke.
Yeah. Well, the
they
thing
reminded
is
themselves they didn't actually like Batman Forever.
So this was one of those things where it came out, and I have a feeling that this one did really well because the previous two had done very well. So it became a victim of its own success, where the previous two had done very well. This one came out, people went and saw it, and then when people had the option to go see Batman and Robin, they suddenly realized, oh, this is going to be more of what I got last time, and I didn't like it that much. So it was just the law of diminishing returns. But I think people were unfairly angry about this movie. And I think it might have just been because of the time. Because it used to be, you didn't get that many superhero movies.
See, I think this is true. Yeah, Go ahead. Finish your point, but I'll add to it when you're done. And actually, I'm going to give you a point in advance because I agree with you completely.
Well, it's funny because I remember living through that time period, and there were a couple genres like this where you didn't get them much. You really just didn't get them. Like, you didn't get superhero movies. You didn't get zombie movies. Zombie movies was a big one for me because I was a big Night of the Living Dead fan. I was a big like Dawn of the Dead fan. But you didn't get the modern sense of zombie movies until 28 Days Later came out. And then you got the whole cycle of zombie movies that's still like with us through the awful, the Walking Dead movie. Yeah. But
vampires are still around though. Vampires are still pretty hip.
But the thing is that I think that people were harsher on the ones that you didn't get that much. Because it was like you would be built up to it and you'd be like, oh my God, this is going to be the Batman movie I get for the next 5 years. And it would just take over the whole landscape. Everything Batman connected would be this Batman style.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's certain places where this style still happens. Like if you go to Six Flags Great America, all their stuff is this style Batman. They didn't modernize it. There's none of the new stuff. It's all 90s Batman. Yeah. So I think people were unfairly rude to it.
Yeah. So to expand on that point, I think you're absolutely correct. We absolutely, because I think one of the key things about what may make our opinions about this different is the world we lived in when this came out, the world we lived in when we last talked about it in 2011, when there were exactly 2 Marvel movies out. It was, I think, Iron Man and Iron Man 2 when it was Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, and Thor 2 was coming out later that summer. And the Incredible Hulk, like, they don't even talk about anymore. Like, it's fucking not even on Disney Plus.
It's owned by Universal.
Yeah. And then now, where comic book movies are the king, like, no fucking question. So this version, right? This is I'm going to say, yes, Chris is absolutely right. This is a thing where a comic fan, somebody who likes Batman, you weren't going to get a lot, right? You were like, this is my one shot. And if this isn't what you wanted, then you were like, fuck. Like, that's it. That's the fucking ball game. But now it's like, if you don't like a version of Batman, wait a couple of years. Because you're going to get a new fucking version, right? And I'll say this Schumacher version, not my least favorite cinematic Batman, because fucking Zack Snyder absolutely took the cake on that one.
God, I love the fact that there's at least, this movie has a sense of humor about itself. If anything, the Zack Snyder films, all Zack Snyder films are humorless. I haven't heard a joke that wasn't at the cost of like somebody else's intelligence in the movie. It's like when you watch the Zack Snyder films, they're very mean-spirited, it feels like. There's not a whole lot of light in that world, which might be a stylistic choice, but it's also really boring after 5 or 8 movies.
They couldn't be more diametrically opposed to these Schumacher movies if they tried. Like, I think even more so than the Christopher Nolan movies, where Batman still has a moral, ethical, like, I don't kill, I am worried about becoming a monster aspect to him. Those movies are so fucking dark. Batman's fucking slaughtering people left, right, and center, and
branding people. Yeah,
it's so much worse than this version of Batman where he's fucking going on crazy adventures and his villains are like over the top crazy, and it's like, you know what? I'm okay with this existing. This is just a version of Batman. Is it my favorite? No, but
sure.
In the modern world, we've had so many iterations of this character and still get them. It's like, I am not offended by the Joel Schumacher Batmans anymore. Like, they are what they are, and they're fine in their little place.
Well, I will say this. So you guys have effectively described my childhood trauma of my 10th birthday party of knowing that this was going to be my only shot at the Riddler, who was my favorite villain, and seeing what I saw and being there was a lot of denial going on because like we're going to talk about it later about the soundtrack because I bought this soundtrack. I owned this soundtrack. I was so hyped for this movie. And to be disappointed the way I was, it started with the theme because they ditched the Danny Elfman theme. And it just got worse from there. So I think I still have scars from that childhood for me to even look upon this film as fondly, because even Batman and Robin just abandons any pretense of like trying to make this.
Sure, this one's a little more halfway.
Yeah. Like this one was like, okay, we got the Tim Burton generation, but what are we going to get for the MTV generation? You know, we need to pop it up a little bit. Let's have, what if we gave Robin an earring? And that kind of thing, because this is Warner Brothers basically milking, going back to the cash trough.
Yeah, you
and
just
things
like just out for a ride in my love machine.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that was weird. That sequence does not age well. The fact that Robin is trying to pick up who I believe were supposed to be prostitutes who were dressed like Las Vegas showgirls.
Yeah, that's right.
Very strange style.
Yeah, or like flight attendants on the Fifth Element or some shit.
What struck me as really egregious about that sequence is Robin saves this girl from, she's like minutes away, like from, these people are going to attempt to rape this woman. Like that is what's going on. I'm pretty sure we all agree. And he saves her and she's immediately like, don't I get a kiss? Like, what the fuck? This is not how people respond in traumatic situations like this.
I also like the, the supposed like really smart, criminal psychologist or whatever, like doesn't know that bats aren't rodents or whatever. And I don't know, it's that whole relationship. Chase Meridian's whole purpose of the movie is to do two things. Be bait for Batman, for the bad guys, as they often are, as love interests often are in comic book movies, but also just to wantonly throw herself at either Batman or Bruce Wayne. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And a pretty young Nicole Kidman, though. It does strike me how young she was, because she was like, she wasn't quite near the star power that she later got on, but it is pretty shocking to see her like pretty young.
Yeah, I think this was just like right before she did Moulin Rouge. I think that was the next big part she did a couple years after this.
This was, I think this was a few
95,
years. I think
so
that was like 90. I think Moulin Rouge was 99.
Okay, Moulin Rouge is definitely 99, 2000, because I definitely remember that.
Yeah.
I mean, this one's definitely a speed bump in everyone's career, but
some more wall-like than others. One of my favorite discussions that I remember back in the Film Concussion days is we went on a thing about Chris O'Donnell and how Chris O'Donnell was like supposed to be like up there with like Leo and Matt Damon and shit, and like he did this movie and it just dropped off from there.
And he was just handsome. He was just a really handsome guy, but
he's okay as Robin. I don't mind. I mean, Robin doesn't really work as a grown man. I just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It fits in with the second one too. Like Batman and Robin also like involved Alicia Silverstone, so I think they were going for the most broad, least offensive general appeal. But being that broad of an appeal also means that you don't get like a real edginess to it outside of the fact he had an earring in. So it's pretty tame.
Sure.
But I mean, you were also right that like Batman is always supposed to be kind of campy. Like, like if you look at the old, Bill Finger days, like it is basically Riddler, fighting him on a giant chess piece, and they're all like, or on a giant piano.
For sure. He's got all those props in his cave, like the giant fucking coin and all that shit. And there's like the thing is, there are and can be so many different versions of this character, from the Adam West to the Zack Snyder. It's not for me. Some people really love it. And it's fine. Like I am not as existentially like angry with this movie as I was. And I'll say this also about it. We are living now in obviously a time where we're awash in these fucking superhero movies. And the MCU is one thing, but even movies that are worse than the MCU, including the one we talked about last time, the Fantastic Four, or the Fantastic Four that came out after that Fantastic Four. Like those are movies that are
Right.
awful and have no sense of personal identity or style. And I will say this for Batman Forever, it has some personal identity and style. Like Joel Schumacher had his vision. He's like, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, you fucking go hard. And they did. Like, there is an identity to this film, and you can't take that away from it.
Oh, I kind of agree with that too, because like, yeah, instead of what if we just took all the Tim Burton darkness and just made it Joel Schumacher sexiness? Let's really highlight the buttocks on the bat suit. Like that. It is in your face with just like sexuality. Even Two-Face's like little henchmen, Sugar and Spice. They're just like prancing around in their underwear, which again, that does not jive with the 1960s Batman. That's very much
there's
like
this
in
comic. There's this guy who makes comics online. His name is Adam Ellis, and he has this one comic of him as a little kid, right? And he's going to, I think it's actually Batman and Robin in the comic, but he goes to the theater to see it as a little boy, and you see him like excited to see it, and as it goes on, he's like looking more and more disappointed. And then the final frame is him walking out of the theater thinking to himself, so I'm definitely not straight.
I gotta be honest. That is something I picked up on this viewing way more than I did previously. Like, this one is definitely more open to the camp, and it's funny because I can understand how people in the 90s would watch this movie and probably be kind of tone deaf to a great deal of the homoerotic subtext that was kind of brought up at different points in the movie.
In Batman, no.
Well, it's just funny because it watching it, I kind of wished, in a weird way, I wish that it had just gone all the way with that. Like, I would be way more entertained watching a movie that was just took the source material and went someplace that I didn't expect to a degree that would make it interesting again. Like, this is the problem I have with all these movies. Go ahead.
No, you by all means.
I was just going to say that I have an issue with these movies because you don't have as much of an option for being surprised walking into any of these now. Like, you know who Batman is, you know who all these people are. And like the only times, and you could probably express this if you have a different feeling, Zach, but for me, the only times I've been interested in most of the Marvel stuff lately have been when it's like somebody who comes to it and has their own sense that isn't beholden to the rest of it. So like Taika Waititi's stuff, where it's just Taika Waititi doing his Thor thing, as opposed to telling me the Thor
Sam
story.
Raimi being attached.
Sam Raimi. Or even if we want to go outside of Marvel to a different thing, another superhero thing that I really enjoyed was the Suicide Squad. James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
Because I didn't know much about the
Russell, I know,
characters.
was not a big fan, but I thought it was.
It was
fun.
okay. I was okay. It was fun. It was just I only thought it was okay. It was fine. It was fine.
But the thing is, it was showing me something I didn't know already. It was something new. It was something interesting, and it could take me into a new place.
Sure.
I have some thoughts about this I could briefly talk about. If you know me personally or follow me on like different platforms, you might know that I have slowly become aggrieved of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is as a leftist who hates the man, I despise the Disney Corporation's control over all of the media landscape and crushing small businesses and theaters. So just flatly, Disney evil is part of it. But the other part is these movies, and I liked a lot. I was like, I would see every Marvel movie in theaters up through Endgame, like even a couple after that. I think The Eternals was the first one I just didn't see. I saw Spider-Man No Way Home, and I haven't seen any in theaters since then. But like the thing is, these movies had an interesting idea. They were original, they were fresh, they were like this thing for a while, and I was enjoying them at the beginning, and even through Endgame, where like they achieved something that I'd never seen any media like thing achieve, right? They told this insane story. They, with so many different semi-franchises tying together to this natural climax. And now it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going for 15 years. And there's going to be 3 to 4 movies a year, plus 3 to 4 TV shows. And the stories kind of climaxed. Like now it's just shambling. And these movies are all kind of the same. Like even when you get these directors who have a little bit more of a focus, you can get sometimes a bit of a different tang on them, right? Like James Gunn makes the Guardian movies feel a little different. But even that is so diminished. Like Disney smothers that fire as much as it possibly can to make the same fucking movie. And I'll say this, like DC movies, I don't like them all. They're much more hit or miss. Like Marvel movies, you're always expecting a bar minimum. Like there's a native element of samey quality. DC movies can be good, they can be bad, but they can also be different in a way MCU movies fucking never can. And Joel Schumacher movie, this movie, it's fucking different. And Matt Reeves, the Batman, it's fucking different. But like, I am ultimately sick of this never-ending lurching thing that is going to go, has made more movies in 14 years than James Bond made in 60, and is going to do at least 1.5 times as many movies in probably the next 10 years as they've already made.
I want to give you a point really quick, because I've never been able to properly thank you for pointing out the number math on James Bond and Marvel movies, because I also was just watching a James Bond movie and realized that I was incredibly bored, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, this is what it's going to be like. If it feels like this with this movie after that thing's been going on for this long, I cannot imagine how painful it's going to be in 15 years watching a Marvel movie.
I hear that. I've probably got a higher tolerance threshold for the Marvel movies. I don't go to the theaters for basically anything. I did go to the theaters for the Batman because I've been a Batman fan since I was a wee one. And I really never saw the Snyder versions, to be honest with you. I saw that I waited as long as I possibly could because I knew what I was getting into with Zack Snyder doing Batman.
Yeah. Snyder Cut was free on HBO. I started to watch it. I never finished that shit.
Yeah,
4
right.
hours is too long.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and that's what and it's not like the Matt Reeves movie is brief, because that movie you feel that length. But at least with the back in the day, because like this movie was made in it, the MCU, kind of changed everything as far as superhero movies go. And I think probably because it's been all under the umbrella of Kevin Feige that he sort of gets he's the mastermind behind it. Back in that day, you had like these producers who had one bit of property or whatever. And in this case, it was Warner Brothers who already owned DC and all that stuff. So, and they had already made massive amounts of success with Superman and Tim Burton's Batman specifically. Like 89's Batman cannot be stressed enough how much of a smash that fucking was.
Sure.
Even the Prince soundtrack was pretty up there, and I don't think when Burton was making the 89 Batman that he had McDonald's toys in mind when he was making it. I'm sure Warner Brothers did, but I think at the time they felt, well, we've got Tim Burton, we'll let him roll and we'll find some toys to throw in there. I'm sure there's going to be a Batmobile or some shit. So when it comes to what happened with after Batman Returns, which was very successful. I mean, it did make a lot of money, just not as much money as the 89 Batman. So Burton kind of was at loggerheads with Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers desperately wanted to get Happy Meal toys back into McDonald's. So they decided to go with a lighter tone with Schumacher. And because of that, you can see how this movie was set up basically to be merchandise.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's almost more true.
And I can say, for sure, more true for Batman and Robin because the formula stuck. I mean, it's not like this movie bombed. It still made a shit ton of money. But by Batman and Robin, they realized, well, we could just do that and the morons will still show up and pay for it. I will say for the MCU, they haven't quite gotten to that level of, shall we say, aggressive, just like, we're just going to market the hell out of you. We got you your money already. Now go buy McDonald's, go buy the soundtrack, go buy, there isn't that intertwined. But what there is do subscribe to Disney Plus so you could watch if you could have
fair,
any understanding for Scarlet Witch.
I have a girlfriend who is a nanny and nannies small children, and the plethora of MCU toys they own is not insubstantial. It is a lot of them.
Sure.
So it's not like it doesn't. I mean, McDonald's Happy Meal toys are kind of just like not as much a thing straight up is part of the thing.
Okay, but there's not a line. But there's not a line of say I'll go get through drive-through. Like they don't literally just wink at like drive-through at McDonald's. Like it gets worse in Batman and Robin. But
yeah, have you guys seen Batman and Robin recently?
I saw it last
it's been a
year,
while.
I think.
Okay, because I just rewatched it today, basically, in prep for this. I think Carlsen, you went off and watched the Batman. I watched Batman and Robin.
I had to get a palate cleanser.
That's interesting. And I will say, I'll also say one other thing briefly, and I'll let you continue. I think that in general, media has gotten better at disguising product placement in the years between then and now.
Absolutely, that was actually
1,000%.
Exact thing I was going to say, because watching Batman and Robin, they literally get into like a bidding war on something. It doesn't really matter. It's like Poison Ivy shows up.
Poison Ivy is right. She's win a day with Poison Ivy.
That's it. So they get into a bidding war, and it gets to the point where Batman pulls out like I believe a discovered card.
Yeah, his Bat
it just
discovered
has Batman.
Card.
Yeah, and he just goes never leave home without it. And they do like bits like that throughout the movie. So yeah, it's definitely like just sort of a clunky like, oh boy, that's a real moment that takes you out of enjoying the movie, and you feel like suddenly you're getting advertised at.
Sure, and I will say this, even though because I think we should get to why we've come here, we've arrived at this movie, because that kind of keys into the marketing of it, because this soundtrack came out, and like I said, the '89 Prince soundtrack was pretty popular and sold really well. This soundtrack, however, had a particular song that was fucking smash, right? This song was everywhere.
Yep.
It's, if in case you don't know what I'm talking about, Seal's "Kiss from a Rose," which is not featured at all in the movie.
I think it's over the
at
end
all.
credits?
It's at the end credits after the U2 song, which is also not featured in the movie, which is directly written for this soundtrack.
This is also not the first time "Kiss from a Rose" has appeared on a movie soundtrack. This was something I discovered. It was featured prominently in one scene, at least, where a little sister had on a pair of headphones in the movie Never Ending Story 3.
Okay.
Okay. That happened before this, but yeah, it's prominently on that soundtrack. So that one introduced the song to the world. This is the one that blew it up, because I
that's
believe
weird because even Schumacher directed the music video for this song, because that's the thing. Like both this and Judgment Night were around during the MTV era, right? So marketing a soundtrack with popular artists was a lot easier, because then you could just pump through music videos and stuff, and it's a whole other brand of marketing, because 6 singles came out of this fucking soundtrack, which is weird. That's weird.
It's the era of Men in Black, you get these big even Godzilla had a smash song from Puff Daddy.
For sure.
Nobody wanted to
with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, you got the Flaming Lips in here. You got Nick Cave in here. Like it's a murderer's row. I actually accidentally looked up the score instead of the soundtrack, and some of the names of these scored. So one is called Fledermaus Marsh Music, all one word. Let's see, Mouth to Mouth Nocturne, the Two-Face 3-Step, Batter Damarung, and then my favorite. Oh, there's Holy Rusted Metal. They named a song that, and then the Spank Me Overture. There's just I don't know what
I don't remember what
that connects to.
Spank Me Overture. I don't know.
I think that's that is very strange.
The score is pretty good though. Like it builds on Danny Elfman's music, and I think
it's fine. It's just not as good. It's notably not as good as the Elfman score, and it's trying to kind of reach for that. That's why I appreciated the recent Batman score, where it's just like that 4-note leitmotif throughout it, and it's just very haunting and effective. This one was much more like a military march,
Would you say you prefer that interpretation of the Riddler to the Jim Carrey?
Oh, well, okay, I'm of two minds about it. Like I said, as you asked earlier, what's changed? I'm a little softer on Carrey, just because of his. I think the best person to play Riddler was Carlsen in the '60s. He had that right balance of sort of manic and hyper intelligence, and criminal mastermind sort of thing. I liked Dano as Riddler. It was fine. I liked the overall what they did with the Riddler in Reeves' Batman versus what they did with the Riddler in this one. Because I mean, Riddler, to say I'm going to get smarter by sucking the brain, that's not Riddler. Riddler already thinks he's the smartest person. He doesn't need to get any smarter. That's not Riddler. Riddler already knows he's the smartest person in the world.
Yeah, he's an insane narcissist. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he would almost be offended at the idea he could learn something from other people.
Right. This is more of like, right. So anyway, but anyway, back to the soundtrack real quick, because they had like The Offspring, which was still kind of up and coming then, and they even got the mighty U2 to write a song for it, and it's not very good.
Sure.
The U2 song's not good. And Method Man shows up for the Riddler. And like I said, I owned this soundtrack. I was that excited for this movie that I bought it. But I got to hand it for that Kiss from a Rose song, because that song, if I had to like pick,
and
like
I like Bad Days a lot too. I think Bad Days is great.
Oh, and that's probably one of the few songs that's featured very heavily in the actual movie, is when like Riddler's kind of losing it. I thought that was good outside of this. Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was a Ween song when it came up, just because of the voice. But yeah, I surprised. It's the Flaming Lips.
Yeah, it's not a Flaming Lips are all over the place. I'm not real well learned on the Flaming Lips, but I do like that song quite a bit. But I mean, again, you've got to say for that Seal song, like if you were to put a top 10 most 90s song that would evoke you of thinking of the 90s, that song's got to be on there. Because like you hear it, you're like, oh God, I'm back in like, middle school doing a roller skating party, that kind of shit. So I got to hand it to you, Zach. You nailed it with this one, because I would argue, the soundtrack is better than the movie.
I think the soundtrack is better than the movie. As I've established, don't hate this movie really. Like, I think that there's a weirdness to it that I have grown to admire in a certain way. I also think that this is the earliest example I can think of a superhero villain trope that I have seen. The MCU has done this, for example. The Amazing Spider-Man movies have done this. That recent Wonder Woman movie did this, of the villain who is a loser nerd who is obsessed with the alter ego of the superhero, not knowing that they're actually like the superhero, and then becomes a supervillain. So like that's Riddler in this. It's Jamie Foxx as Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man, the Mandarin in Iron Man 3, who gets like rejected by Tony Stark, and what's her name, Kristen Wiig in Wonder Woman. Like they're all that same Riddler stereotype.
That kind of villain trope is as old as comic books, though. I mean, that's
I mean, it seems like it's just the general, like the very vague argument of like, you have somebody who's our main character who worked for their place of power versus someone who's trying to get it quick, and we always have to judge the person who gets into power quick as being awful, just because that's what our storytelling style tells us it has to be. So what other songs, other than Kiss from a Rose, what other songs stand up from this? Because I know Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me sounded, I think it was a big hit when it came out, but listening to it again,
they released a single. It's not good.
Well, it sounds like they're ripping off T-Rex, like Children of the Revolution. Like they steal like a main like da 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 da. Like that's a main song chunk. I don't know what it's called. It's, I guess, a chord progression. But other than that, I'm not sure if I know any of these songs.
Well, there's a pretty decent Offspring song where they're covering a Damned song, Smash It Up. That's okay. And they say pretty faithful to the original. It's the Damned. What are you going to do? And then there's also and it's kind of weird because this is how much this movie has been in my life. There's a remix / cover of Iggy Pop's The Passenger. Mm-hmm. I heard that before I actually heard Iggy Pop's version. And I was very relieved when I learned that Iggy Pop's version is much, much better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it didn't have the lead singer from In Excess wailing over it. So yeah, it'd probably be better.
And the actual song, they turn into almost like a horror movie, like a stalker side of song. it's like a dun 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 dun. Dun,
oh, I've
dun,
listened to the Iggy Pop.
dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 you know, so it's like not where the actual Passenger song is just it's much more of a jaunty tune, shall we say. And then the other one, like I didn't realize this, but there's a Brandy song on there, but I didn't. It was written by Lenny Kravitz. I saw that in the credits in this rewatch. And then the other song that really stood out to me was the Method Man song about the Riddler. That was pretty fun because, you know, Method Man doesn't need much. He doesn't really need to see the movie. You just tell him that's the Riddler. All right, I'll do it. It's fine. So that, you know, but like, that I know the Kiss from a Rose, the U2 song. I believe the Offspring song was another single. There was like 6 singles. I mean, Seal won a Grammy for this fucking song, best song of the year. Like, this is how significant this film's soundtrack was, and how significant was Batman Forever? Well, it led to Batman and Robin. You know, that's what happened.
Do we have stuff like this anymore? Like, this is one of those things that made me kind of just realize watching it, like, how many times do you have a major hit single from a modern film soundtrack?
These days, they're more like kids or musicals, like, right? Like that We Don't Talk About Bruno song. Like, that was fucking everywhere, right? The Frozen song.
It's something that doesn't... One thing, for instance, the only time you really see it is when it's very much like a tradition or a throwback. So, like, the only movie that's not really a musical, movies that are not really musicals and not kids movies that generally I can think of that have like really big songs attached to them are James Bond movies.
Sure.
Yeah.
You get your Bond theme.
That's probably
that's
true.
From an earlier era. Like, the only reason it exists is because it's a holdover from the 1960s.
Yeah, and like I said, like watching that one recently, I had no anticipation of anything surprising me in the movie, and that is absolutely what I found. Like, every time he was in danger, I knew he was going to get out. Every time somebody he knows is in danger,
were you watching a new one, or were you watching an old one?
I was watching the farewell to Daniel Craig one, the No Time to Die, I think.
No Time. Oh, mild spoiler for that movie. Not everyone gets out.
Well, I mean, there's some people that die. Like, I did watch it, but it was one of those things where it was just, there's like a general...
You could usually expect the love interest to maybe not make it.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, jump forward 30 seconds, listener, if you're interested in No Time to Die and haven't seen it. James Bond dies in that movie.
Yeah, I actually haven't finished watching the movie yet, but I already kind of knew that was going to happen.
Oh shit!
Yeah, but it's funny. It's one of those things where it's like, because it was the last one in the series, sure, they're going to kill him, but it's one of those things where, like, all the action sequences up until they actually are going to kill him, I'm not concerned that the character's going to die.
Yeah. They also kill, what's his name? Felix Leiter, who's a mainstay of the Bond franchise, played by Jeffrey Wright.
And Joe Don Baker back in the day.
No, Joe Don Baker played a different character.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought he was Felix. But anyway, but what you were talking about earlier with this movie, where you really never felt like, part of the rum with like the Burton and the Schumacher Batmans is like, Batman's superpower is having everything he needs on his belt at that specific time. The jet boots, the flame retardant cape, it's all there. One of the things I liked that Nolan did, and was continued on at least in the Reeves Batman, is like all of Batman's like tech. It's like Chekhov's gun, right? Like, he says, "Oh, you got to use it," and then it shows him using it, or it's a major plot point or something, where it's not just sort of like, oh, well, I need a bat repellent, you know, which again, throwback to the 60s, because there was never an explanation for Batman to have shark repellent, but there he's got it. Thank God he had it.
In the Reeves version in particular, a lot of his tech does not always work great.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's supposed to be younger and less practiced, because there's a scene where he flies under there and just totally eats it. It's funny. So yeah, that's why I this movie lent too much into like a kid's movie. But I think when you think about like popular artists doing songs for movies, and then that song sort of taking on a life of its own, you really don't see it that often. Like, you really, and especially like even nowadays, like yeah, like we were talking about with Frozen and what do we do about Bruno or whatever, like those are written by songwriters, not necessarily popular artists. That's not necessarily like Kesha doing a goddamn song or anything like
Broadway
that.
people who lived in Broadway wrote.
I mean, you can go with A Star Is Born if you'd like, that's probably as close, but that's still like tied into the movie and they're singing about it and it's a part of the movie. It's not just like something that's played in the background and then all of a sudden all the kids like it or whatever. You just don't get it nowadays. I think you're right. I think Bond's the last really. I'm going to give you a point for that, Zach, because like that's a really good point. I think James Bond's sort of the last holdover where you're going to have popular artists singing a song for the movie, but not necessarily as a part of the
that's
movie.
one of the best things about that and the opening credit sequence as a whole. Like the idea that they just like, we're going to put in this little music video that's like 3 or 4 minutes long every fucking time with like whatever, where we hire some artists to create this little montage. Like, I really enjoy that is something that they still do. I think the other thing that holds over for James Bond, and there's a few franchises that still do this, but James Bond is one of them, is practical stunts. This is another thing I hate about the fucking MCU. Sick of the fucking CGI, like fucking Christmas lights climaxes where it's fucking lasers all over the place. It's boring. It sucks. It's more fun when somebody's actually hanging off a plane or whatever. When somebody fights with their fists and like you can tell what the fuck is going on because they're not shooting lasers out of every fucking orifice.
I feel guilty to do this, but I'm going to give you another point because that actually stole my main issue with all the Marvel movies, which is that the characters have interpersonal problems until the writer can't figure out how to make two characters work out their differences, and then it's just CGI men beating each other in CGI locations where no one's actually there, nothing matters, and you already know the movie's going to be over and that the bad guy's going to die about 20 to 25 minutes before you've sat through that sequence.
I've read some directors say that Marvel pre-renders some of those fight scenes before they even get the director on and are like, just work around it. Make your movie around these scenes we've already predetermined are going to be
1,000%. I almost admire that because that shows you know what you want, at least as Feige is concerned. It sucks for the director to have to work around that, but that's how, you have to get these pre-renderings done to get it released in time. Otherwise, these movies take 5 years, and Disney's not gonna, they've got shareholders to answer to. That's not gonna fly. When you've promised, like when you've already delivered. This is the problem with my all-time, lesson that I learned in show business. If you're good at something, keep it to your fucking self. Don't let anybody know. Just like keep it to yourself. And unfortunately, that's what we're dealing with comic book movies today. But as far as like the over CGI stuff, I mean, like Jesus, they made like 6 Transformers movies, and those movies are like nothing but like just CGI gasm shit.
No one's accused the Transformers movies of being good, though.
Yeah, that's true. But they keep making them. They keep making them.
I think they finally stopped. People like the Bumblebee one. I didn't see it, but that was Michael Bay free.
Sure. Well, and that's why I sort of, in a way, I admire like the Fast and the Furious franchises because the way that's just like car chases. It's not, it's not really.
Yeah, I like the Mission Impossible franchise because they do practical stunts. I like James Bond because they usually do practical stuff. There's like the John Wick movies, like those are choreographed fight scenes. Like,
well, I mean, even if you think about it, the original Indiana Jones isn't much. It's just like stunt work. That's pretty much all Raiders of the Lost Ark is. There's not a lot to it.
I mean, this movie is. Sorry, I just want to quickly say this movie's beautiful. That's one thing that people like haven't really like.
It's got a unique look.
Like the thing is the actual way they shoot it. It looks like everything's a perfume ad, but just in sense of like the cinematography and the rest of it, it's good. I think the only scene that kind of jumps out as a little like loosey-goosey in terms of the production design is all the stuff with blacklight, because there's like a blacklight fight scene at one point, which they do better in Batman and Robin, where they just went full in on blacklight for an entire section, and it's it's fine.
Well,
it's just one of these things. Like it's a pretty
I would argue.
movie.
I would argue beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Because like I do not like that sort of lighting style and the sort of like trying to make like you remember that Wachowski version of Speed Runner? Like that movie gave me a headache.
Yeah, a lot of people really love that. I haven't seen it yet, actually. But a lot of people do love that movie.
That movie gave me a headache just because of how just pastel it is. It drives me nuts.
Seeing it on a small screen makes it better, actually. Sorry, because I have a similar feeling to that, because watching
you like
Batman
all the Dutch tilts, do you? You know?
Well, no, Batman and Robin, like, they actually have a lot of like full screen flashes that happen, and I'm not like epileptic, but it's one of those things, like, if you have like a whole screen flashing in front of you, it's very upsetting and uncomfortable as an audience member. So strangely enough, having it on a smaller screen where it's not as overwhelming in terms of the look of it made it a little bit more palatable for me, for whatever reason.
It's really just a lot of the Dutch tilts and a lot of the gels on camera on the lights. Like, there's no clear light anywhere. There's just all this neon, like Riddler's lair looks like a nightclub. Like, it's
90s. It's 90s.
Yeah. And again, that's sort of, it's a throwback to the 60s, but when you're sort of just doing it as just a throwback to the 60s, but, you know, maybe the kids will get it. A huck, you know, the MTV kids, those kids. Like, whereas I don't think Burton was trying to do that. I think Burton was just trying to do Burton. That's where this movie sort of ends up, to me, sort of empty and soulless and just a equivalent of a corporate cash grabber, as we now know at the MCU.
Well, I loved my Riddler glass cup and my Two-Face coin as a little boy.
I did too. I had the Riddler shirt. I went through a period of like denial, like, no, the movie's good. It was fine. It was fine. Then like it kind of slowly sunk in on me that like, oh, this movie's
you were an apologist in the same way that kids who grew up with the new Star Wars movies are apologists about how Phantom Menace isn't a terribly unwatchable film because they grew up on it as children.
That's right. Yeah. And
sure.
But I mean,
children like bad things. That's I think a lot of people.
True.
You know what? You want me to? I already shot out the MCU. Let me say my most controversial possible take. All right. So every generation has movies that, you know, they only like because they came out when they were kids and they were too stupid to be discerning. Space Jam would be an example, one for about people our age. And sometimes there are movies that are pretty good. And Goonies, a lot of people say that about Goonies. Sometimes there are movies that are pretty good, but people confuse them for great because they came out when they were kids, and that's fucking Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is fine. It's not amazing.
Okay,
it's
Zach.
Okay.
But I think we've established on this podcast that considering the competition at the time, you can imagine why it has such a mainstay, because it was up against the genius of Police Academy.
Stop remaking it. Stop making sequels.
Oh, sure.
It's fine.
Yeah. Sure.
Let it be dead. We don't need to fucking revisit it anymore. But I'll say one last thing, and then maybe we should get into final thoughts. I don't really have anything to follow this up on. I was almost surprised when Chris O'Donnell shows up, because he doesn't show up until like the 40-minute mark, and I'm like, oh right, Robin is in this movie when he showed up. I genuinely forgot for a while.
This is the major problem you have with comic book movies, is they try to do too much. Because I even think like the Reeves Batman had way too many balls in the air. It juggles them fine, but like that's a lot of pull towards Bruce and Batman. And this one had the same thing. You've got this whole relationship with Dick Grayson, and then this relationship with Chase Meridian, and this sort of implied but not really shown or talked about relationship with himself. And then this movie's kind of a mess in that respect, because it's so I'll get into my final thoughts because I'll be done with this here. I think it's really ironic to me that this is not necessarily Warner Brothers or DC's fault, but it's ironic to me that most of the style and storylines that they went through for this movie were based off of a guy named Bill Finger, who actually created Batman. Bob Kane just sort of took credit for it for a long time. That's a whole other story unto itself. But Bill Finger didn't start getting credit for Batman until the Snyderverse, because he very much created it. Bob Kane basically just took Bill Finger's idea and walked it to DC, and the rest is history. So that pisses me off that still happens, that they can't, digitally alter the credits, but I get it. So it's a silly, stupid, empty movie with more sexiness and style than substance. An idea of not inserting your own point of view, but sort of like as a niche point of view to something that's already been well established and successful with Tim Burton, because you're still doing a Tim Burton kind of style, but it's not really Tim Burton because, you know, look, Warner Brothers paid for all these sets. God damn it, we're going to use them. So that, but you have to hand it to them, and this is where I think you guys were kind of touching on earlier, that this was a corporate cash grab for Warner Brothers. But this is actually back when it was a little easier to do it, because as you said, you could only do this once every 5 years. But boy, it better land, because if it doesn't, then you're in trouble. And I think that's where they started to notice the diminishing returns with Batman and Robin. So that's, you can give it this. This is back when it was a little bit easier to sort of just be a naked cash grab and sort of make it look like it's your major studio tentpole release, because it was. Nowadays, your studio basically is just a factory of just churning them out, you know, 3 or 4 a year, basically. So you got to give it that, I guess, as an interesting. And as far as the soundtrack's concerned, look, you know, you can't mess with that Seal song. Not a big fan of it, but boy, that song was popular and everywhere. So gotta hand it that this movie's gonna have to live in infamy because of that song, because of what a smash that song was. And the Flaming Lips song, Bad Days, it's a good song. So I agree with Zach. Soundtrack certainly better than the movie, and certainly, while associated with my childhood trauma, does not bring me. It's the happier memories of my childhood trauma. Is this soundtrack? So well done.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think when I was a little kid, I liked this movie just fine. I wanted to see a Batman thing. I got a Batman thing. I was a very small child. I was maybe 7 years old when this came out. Like, what am I, the most discerning fucking person on the planet? I don't know. It's a movie with Batman in it. But then as I
you
got
were just
older,
at the age of reason, you know. Yeah. So
I got older, and I did have some degree of antagonism towards it, as was popular at the time. And I think now that there is a dominance of the superhero culture over like what is popular, like in not just even just MCU, but all over, like every single summer there's so many different superhero movies, and a lot of them can be not just bad but boring and dull, and like you forget you saw them after you walk out of the theater, like immediately. This is not a problem this movie has for me. Like, I remember, like, they, you know, there's something memorable and debatably enjoyable about seeing fucking Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones just push it to 13 on a scale of 10. Like, but yeah, and here's the thing, like, it's also such a weird, like, sort of like campy, sort of homoerotic, unique thing. Sometimes people say these things about like certain movies, like you could never make that today, and usually they're wrong. Like, usually it's a movie you could make today. You'd probably have to tweak a couple things, but basically you could make that movie today. I don't know if you'd make this movie today. Like, this is, and it's not a political thing. It's just like this kind of movie you can't really do now.
It's too obvious now. It's way too obvious.
So yeah, I don't. I think I have come to appreciate this movie more as I've gotten older. It's still got huge problems. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are story problems and script problems and, you know, all kinds of things. But I appreciate this is somebody who decided to make a piece of art. They had a specific vision and they acted upon it. It is not the soulless, empty thing that some movies are, in my opinion. I know Russell was very into the product placement and whatever. Yeah, I mean, obviously they did do that, but there was some. Joel Schumacher had an idea. He had an idea for what it should look like and what it should be, and what this city would look like, and what these characters would be like, and what version of Batman he was going to make. And to some degree or another, he acted upon that vision. So I have to give it that. Still, the soundtrack probably more memorable. Like I said last episode, I'm not the biggest music guy, so, you know, I could be out of my depth on that one sometimes.
Sure.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump into it. I surprisingly appreciated being able to go back and revisit this one, because I had written it off completely as something I would ever look at again. So it was interesting to be forced to go back and watch it again, thinking of it in terms of all of the stuff that has come out since, and reconsidering my own preconceptions going into the movie of what I did and didn't like about it. Strangely, like, some of the stuff I actually kind of miss, like the fact that the movies could be a little sexy, the fact that the movies could do strange things, the fact that it did things that were new, even if they didn't work. Like, that was one of the things I really appreciated, because it's like, I like a movie that tries something, even if it doesn't work. Just take me someplace new with the story in some fashion. And in this one, they just went full camp, as opposed to what they actually found was more successful later, which was the completely humorless version of Batman that was just punching people. Or like being an extremely serious character. Like, I would say, arguably, The Dark Knight is probably the best version of the Batman that I've seen, mostly because of how good the villain was. Like, the character Batman himself is a little dull to me, but having someone as unhinged as how Heath Ledger was in that film, I think cemented it, because it was such a big bad guy that made the lead better. That said, I'm going to just go ahead and say it. Joel Schumacher has done a lot of movies, some of them good, some of them really bad. One thing that's true of Joel Schumacher in his private life is that he was gay. I think that it was interesting that he was able to bring some of that sensibility into this film, even if it was a very low subtextual way. I haven't seen that particular thing done again in a superhero film, outside of, if we're just going to talk about the genre, Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol, which is a TV show, not a movie, does have a lot of very overtly gay storylines in it that I think is
one of the main characters is gay. At least one, maybe two.
I appreciate that that's something that they could explore and not be held back when they did Doom Patrol. In Batman, they never would have been able to take it further than they did in this. You know, it's a fine movie. Like, I think it's very pretty. I don't think that it's great. I don't think that it does everything well, but I appreciate that it at least was more memorable than, for example, The Eternals, which I watched, I believe, the entire film, but cannot remember what happens in the end of it at all. I do not know if they beat the CGI monsters or not, or if anyone dies. I don't remember. I don't remember.
They're Eternals. They don't die.
I guess that probably makes sense. Anyway.
Yeah. All I know about the movie is they changed it so a black man invented the nuclear bomb.
An Eternal gave them the technology. Whatever. Read up your Jack movie, because that's
wow,
pretty much how that goes. The Eternals is weird. But yeah, I don't look on this movie as fondly as you guys do. I'm it's just too raw for me because of just how stupid it is.
It's because it ruined your birthday.
They ruined my birthday. That, you know, Tommy Lee Jones, Two-Face is not like this wacky guy. That is not who Two-Face is. I mean, you can get away with it with
like
a Riddler,
I said earlier, like, both of these characters are just the Joker kind of pretending to be another villain.
Yeah,
and, like,
right.
I said that then, I said that today. I will believe that forever. Like, that's what's going on.
And that's exactly what.
And I will say, even in our original recording, I don't know for sure. I think, and I will bet that even then, we thought Batman Forever was at least better than the Fantastic Four movie.
Yes. That I know that. I know that for a fact. And I even saw like the new Fantastic Four for some reason. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. But yeah, so that and yeah, the soundtrack is fine. It's good. Yeah, even the Offspring cover's pretty good.
Okay.
So all right, that is where we are at now. So before we get on our final journey through journey of music and motion picture, let's get a rundown of points, because boy, we did a good job today, guys. So Boref, you got 1 point from Zach because of how sparse the superhero movies were back in the day. I didn't get any bonus points, but I gave out a bonus point. Zach Powers, you got 3 points, so you're up to 13 now. You got two from Boref, basically about the MCU. You had two different reasons for giving out that point, but it's basically the same thing. So, and you also got a point from me about the Bond music and how that's sort of a lost artifact, and how, like, that's the last bastion of what I'm talking about here with this theme of popular music being used in movies for the movies, but not necessarily about the movies. So with that in mind, Chris Boroff, what are we watching?
All right, so this one actually gave me an idea. There was a film that I've been thinking of. I fondly remembered my mother telling me it was a bad movie, and I could never understand as a child if she meant that it was based off the content in the film or because it was legitimately a bad film. But, as you guys mentioned, the first film in the Batman quadrilogy, however this was, had Prince making the soundtrack. So there's a film by him that I have never seen and I've always wondered about. I am suggesting Purple Rain.
Holy shit!
I've never seen Purple Rain.
I've never seen that either. So.
I have zero anticipation going in. I know that the album is unbelievably good. I've never heard anything else really about that film other than the album. And I just know that my mom said it was bad, and I never could go see it or find anything out about it outside of just that it's bad. And he's got a motorcycle, and there's a poster that everyone remembers.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's wow. I have seen this movie. It's been a minute. I'm not the biggest Prince fan in the world. I mean, I could admire him. The guy's a hell of a guitar player, and a prolific songwriter. But okay, that is something because
our thoughts on Prince next time.
Yeah.
Since you've seen it, I wanted to ask, just in case it's a disqualification. Since you've seen it, it's not a musical, correct? Like there's a drama, and then they have to be playing music.
Yeah, but it's like kind of like you would think of like The Jazz Singer or A Star Is Born sort of thing.
Okay. So it's that they're
I'll
performing it in the movie.
I think that I allow it. Yes. I'll allow it, but it's not quite like Bee Gees Staying Alive, where like Bee Gees don't just show up and start playing Staying Alive. It's
diegetic movie. It's diegetic music, basically.
I allow it because like it has been a long time since I think I was in high school when this movie was kind of forced on me. So this will be interesting. Okay, all right. Prince, Purple Rain, show up next time. Yeah, that's what we're gonna be doing is Purple Rain. I know there's a lot of Prince fans out there, so please forgive us. Yeah. Okay, well, join us next time for Purple Rain, and it's been fun. I'm glad we got through a superhero movie without Russell removing all of his hair. Yeah, join us next time. I have been Russell Carlsen. I have been joined by Chris Boroff.
The Batman suit, the chicks dig car, right? Chicks dig the car.
Chicks dig the car. They sure do. And I've also been joined by Zach Powers.
I'm out riding in my Love-mobile.
And with that having been said, we always say here, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom. Thanks for joining the Movie Trap.
It's the Movie Trap promise.
It's true. See ya.
So, Danny, what did you think of the movie?
It was very violent. It was a total attack against kids, the whole movie. Everything that kids love was being used against them.
Like what?
Clowns. Even the penguin had a ducky boat.
So
and
things that kids could identify
presents
with.
And mobiles. All that type of stuff were using to hurt kids and capture kids. Penguin's total goal was to hurt kids.
You think it was scary then?
Definitely for kids.
Yeah, for you?
I was actually a little bit scared, and I have never been scared of a movie like this before.
Yeah.
I came out of Terminator 2, fine. It's just not for younger kids. The Penguin always had goop coming out of his mouth. Catwoman took her claws and played tic-tac-toe on a man's face.
And how many times have you seen it?
I saw it twice to get a real good view of it.